Hello! Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at the story and the life of a very important person, Moses. He hasn't had an easy life so far, has he? When he was a baby, he was put in a basket in the water to save him because the Pharaoh wanted to get rid of all the baby boys from Israel. And then he grew up in Pharaoh's palace and did something that he shouldn't have done. So he ran away. But God spoke to him out of a burning bush and told him to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let the people go. He wasn't keen, but he did it anyway, and Pharaoh took a lot of persuading, but eventually God showed Pharaoh how powerful he was, and Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "You can go." So now the Israelites are in the desert. They just escaped from Egypt. Let's see what happens. I think it's possibly the most powerful story in the whole of the Bible. Possibly the most dramatic as well. I'm going to read from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And if you've got this book, you can follow along. It's page 92. God makes a way. Moses and God's people escaped out of Egypt and into the wilderness. They didn't know the way, but God knew the way, and he would show them. "I'll bring you to a new home, a special land," God promised them. "I'll look after you. I am with you." God sent a big cloud for them to follow, a pillar of smoke stretching to the sky. It moved in front of them as they walked and shaded them from the blazing heat of the day. When it was time to rest, it stopped. All through the cold desert nights, it kept them warm, glowing like fire. God led his people through the desert to the edge of the great sea. They were just wondering how to cross it when suddenly they heard a terrible thundering and pounding. It sounded like horses' hooves. They shaded their eyes to look back and screamed. It was! Pharaoh and his army were coming to get them. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. "Get my slaves back!" he screeched, and charged out into the desert after them with 600 of his fastest horsemen and every single chariot in Egypt. What were God's people going to do? In front of them was a big sea. It was so big there was no way around it, but there was no way through it. It was too deep. They didn't have any boats, so they couldn't sail across, and they couldn't swim across because it was too far and they'd drown. And they couldn't turn back because Pharaoh was chasing them. They could see the flashing swords now, glinting in the baking sun, and the dust clouds, and the chariot after scary chariot surging towards them. So they did the only thing that was left to do: panic. "We're going to die," they shrieked. "Don't be afraid," Moses said. "But there's nothing we can do," they screamed. "God knows you can't do anything," Moses said. "God will do it for you. Trust him and watch." "But there's no way out," they cried. "God will make a way," Moses said. After another minute, and it would have been over. But the strangest thing happened. Turns this way. God made the pillar of smoke move. It moved behind the people and hid them from the Egyptians. Then God sent a strong east wind to blow all night long. It blew on the water of the big sea. It blew to the left and it blew to the right until it blew in two towering walls of water. And there, right in the middle of the sea, a muddy pathway opened up. God's people walked across on dry land. When the Egyptians tried to follow, The walls of water crashed back down on them and swallowed them up. God's people were safe. They danced and they laughed and they sang and thanked God. When there had been no way out, God made a way. Many years later, once again, God was going to make a way where there was no way. From the beginning, God's children had been running from him and hiding. God knew his children could never be happy without him, but they couldn't get back to him by themselves. They were lost. They didn't know the way back, but God knew the way, and one day he would show them. Wow. Imagine being there on that day, walking through the water. The Israelites were faced with an impossible challenge. They had nowhere else to go, and all they could do was rely on God. Sometimes we get into trouble. Not trouble that we've caused ourselves, but we face hard times, and the only thing we can do is rely on God. And God has promised again and again and again that he will be with us. So next time you're facing something really difficult, remember that you can rely on God. I wonder what's going to happen to Moses and the people next. See you very soon.